Welcome to the final session of the Widening the Pipeline Fellowship Program. We are ending a year of intense conversations, networking, mentoring, and basically setting a new vision for ourselves and our future. The 25 journalists in this program give me hope that the industry is only going to get better. It's only going to get more inclusive. It's only going to get more reflective of the world that we live in today. I think our next speaker is the perfect capstone to the level and quality of the conversations that we've been having this year. I have been in the business for quite some time, and all throughout my years in journalism, I have heard the name Mizell Stewart III. It always sounded like this epic character from an Arthurian legend, but I knew that Mizell was a journalist who not only opened doors and created pathways for journalists of color and all journalists all over the country. He is someone who has had a deep and strong commitment to journalism, and he's here today to help us think about moving to the next plateau. Many of us don't necessarily want to be executive editors or managing editors or vice presidents of news, but we really need to have that inner consciousness. We need to be able to think that if we do, it's possible. And I can't think of a better person to help us think about that than Mizell Stewart III. Please go to nationalpress.org to read his full bio, because it would take another half hour for me to tell you all of the things that he's done. But Mizell, we are so grateful to you for joining us this morning, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's really exciting to have the opportunity to talk about this topic, because it's truly near and dear to my heart. I can't tell you how many times I talk with journalists who are early in their careers about their future plans, and there are people who will look at me and say, I would not want your job. I would not want to have to deal with all of that. I just want to write. I want to shoot. I want to be an anchor. And it saddens me sometimes when I hear that, because I think about very early in my career. In fact, 35 years ago this summer, I was in my very first newsroom in Springfield, Ohio, and I was a brand new reporter. I did not have the benefit of working in newspaper newsrooms in college. I actually did internships in radio and television, and but I worked on the campus newspaper, and felt fairly confident as a writer, but not completely confident. And I remember working on a story one day and struggling to write a lead. And my city editor was walking past my desk, and I called out to him and asked him if he had a moment to come and take a look at a lead that I was writing and give me some feedback. And his response to me was, "I don't have time." I thought, that's interesting. I'm maybe 4 weeks into my first job, and my boss is telling me not, "I'm busy right now, give me a few minutes," not, "Here's somebody else you can talk to because I've got to rush off to this meeting." It was just, "I don't have time," and poof. Otherwise, this is a really nice person, who really gave me a great foundation that helped move my career forward. But in that moment, in that single interaction, I decided that I was not going to be that kind of boss, and that I wanted to be a boss. And sometimes it's the decision is really that simple. And so Again, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be here. Thanks, Rachel, for inviting me to talk on this topic. Deciding if a top job is for you. And so, give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we'll get moving. And so, what I'd like for you all to do before I really get into content is to ask you to think about how you might define a top job. And so you're just tucking into your first cup of coffee. I know y'all just rushed over from the hotel, but if you could, we just want to turn to the person next to you, and just spend a moment talking about and jotting down a note or two about how you would define a top job. And Rachel, I don't know whether there's a microphone that can be passed around or whatnot, but would love to get just a few people to share their views of what a top job might look like.
Yeah, we do have a mic, Mizell, so we're going to do that whenever you
Great.
give us the signal.
20 seconds. So let's hear a couple of your views on what a top job might look like.
Who wants to go first? Need a volunteer? Okay. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Jennifer. I'm a reporter for the Nevada Current, and what we came up with was someone who makes top-level decisions, communicates with other departments like the CEO to make long-term planning, someone who inspires other people in the company and recruits top talent with that inspiration. And someone who makes top editorial decisions, someone who decides what prints and what does not print, is what we decide what a top job looks like.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you.
Who's next?
Let's do one more.
I feel like a top job.
Yourself.
Oh, I'm Princess with the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service. I feel like a top job is making good money, but still having a life and also being able to move other people up the ladder with you.
Okay. Making good money, have a life.
You want to take one more? Is he frozen?
What a top job might look like. Essentially what that means is, you're a decision maker, but you're also accountable for those decisions. And news organizations have a much wider variety of functions that are open to people with news backgrounds than ever before. Journalists, as the news industry has changed, journalists find themselves taking on far more responsibility for product development, for technology, for partnerships and external programs, and so it's there's so much more. Also, people in top jobs are responsible for vision and strategy at some level. And it could be at a team level for, say, an individual news organization that's part of a larger organization, the organization as a whole. Influence and impact on people, both on the way people move up in the organization. And this is important, how they leave it, because you're making decisions about people. You have that ability. You're also held accountable for the performance of other people. It's often said that the best leaders take personal responsibility for failures, and credit success to their people. They take personal responsibility for things that don't go right, and they share the rewards with their people. I think in a top job, you become known. You're known to others throughout the organization that you are a part of, but you're also known to people in the industry, because there are a whole lot of job titles. This is, a rundown of some of the titles of jobs that one might consider to be a top job. And what I encourage people to really consider is not to get hung up on the specific title. The reason is organizations are slick. Okay, some organizations will try to give you the title that doesn't have a whole lot of power, that doesn't have a lot of responsibility, that doesn't have a whole lot of authority. Really be focused on evaluating opportunities on the basis of decisions you have, the kinds of decisions you're able to make, the number of people, the degree of influence you have in but there's a smorgasbord of titles out there. By the same token, in large organizations such as Gannett and the USA Today network, which I just left, you think about your large network television and cable operations and so forth. There's a hierarchy of job titles that is fairly consistent from organization to organization. Hierarchy, if you will, starts off with, you're an intern, you're close to the entry level. You may be in, say, you're, 4 to 5 years in the business, and then maybe you become a more senior individual contributor, and when you think about it, the bulk of working journalists are at these two levels in the organization. That third level is otherwise known as middle management, and then up to say senior director or director. Director level may be what you would think of as, say, a news director at a television station, or an editor at a or a local newspaper. That next level up in, again, larger organizations is the senior vice president level. That's the CEO may be that final decision maker. But in most news organizations that operate in the United States specifically, that CEO reports to a board of directors. And so at some level, everybody has a boss. And I think that probably one of the biggest epiphanies I've experienced as I've moved through the ranks a variety of different news organizations is that everybody has to do things that they might not want to do. There are some moments in corporate life where you think, wow, I'm a vice president, I'm a managing director, I'm a senior director, and there are days it feels like I'm just another assigning editor in the newsroom. Again, because at some level we all have to answer to somebody. This concept of seat at the table, because just about everybody, particularly journalists of color, women, people who have historically been underrepresented in news organizations, are like, wow, if I get a seat at the table, things are going to be different. if I get a seat at the table, things are gonna change. And so what I want to do in the next few minutes is to share with you some things for you to think about as you consider whether taking that next step and trying to get on a track where you have leadership responsibility, whether that track is for you. And so you might not be a good candidate for a top job. In fact, I call it, I'm calling a bad boss alert here, because you really need to think about your experience, your tendencies, your preferences, your temperament, your personality, and what makes you tick as you think about these future career directions. And so here's some reasons you might not be a good candidate for a top job. If it's all about you, many of us have experienced working for a narcissist. We see in today's news the impact of narcissism on organizations, on entire countries. So if it all has to be about you and your success and not the success of your people, you might not be a good candidate. If you think, once you get to that top job, you don't have to be accountable to other people. I can't tell you how many people intentionally or unintentionally derail their careers because they don't think they have to answer to anybody. They think that, well, nobody's going to notice this. I've had to exit people from organizations because they didn't feel like they had to be accountable for their behavior. They felt like the title and the responsibility gave them the ability to treat other people poorly. If you're a passive person and you would rather that other people take the lead, you might not be a good candidate. Conversely, if you're a control freak, if you like to be in the middle of and apprised of every little detail, you might not be a good candidate because you're going to stress yourself out and you're going to stress your people out. Also, if you want everybody to like you, if you are the people pleasing type, that can prove to be really challenging. In part, I came across a saying a couple of weeks ago that I thought was really pertinent. You will always be the asshole in somebody's story. And if you're not okay with that, because you're going to be in a position to make decisions about people and about projects and processes and ideas that aren't going to make everybody happy. If you're a people pleaser, you will soon find that you tie yourself up in knots. Also, if you like to work independently, if you do your best work by yourself, this may not be the path for you. And if you're satisfied with mediocrity, if you're not striving for excellence in everything that you do, you might not be cut out for this. And finally, if you have a fixed mindset, if you believe that people's ability, intelligence, and capability are fixed and can't be changed, and that people don't grow, you're going to have some challenges in a top job. On the other hand, you'd be a great candidate for moving up if you're energized by helping others be successful, if you don't always have to have the byline, if you don't always have to get the credit, and you are open to lifting others up and helping them get better, you're a great candidate for this. Also, if you can both take direction and give direction. I can't tell you how many times people will apply for leadership roles because they want to be in charge, because they want to be the final decision maker. But as I shared with you on that kind of stair step slide a few minutes ago, everybody has to take orders. And you have to be able to not only give direction, but take direction, and use your influence. If you don't like the direction, the directive you are given, be comfortable using your influence to shift that directive in a way that's more favorable. If you value taking responsibility, a lot of people who get into leadership positions in organizations have had experience on sports teams, being team captains, for example, because they've demonstrated the willingness and ability to take responsibility at a young age. I remember, being the child of a single parent, having to have responsibility for the household and responsibility for my younger brother at a very young age. And I look back on that experience, and there were some times when I really wasn't happy about that. But, having to take on that responsibility when I did, I think really set me up for my future success. Also, if you don't always have to be in control, I can't tell you how many times stuff just lands in your lap and you're like, I can't believe so-and-so did such and such. But now, as the leader, you got to be engaged and involved in cleaning it up. So if you don't always have to be in control and can respond, even when you might have made a different decision, and steer a situation to a positive outcome, that's a good quality. If you enjoy being with and interacting with others. Now, let's not get it twisted. I'm not suggesting, for example, that extroverts, you have to be an extrovert in order to be a good candidate for a top job. Because I'll tell you what, I am not an extrovert by any stretch of the imagination. But I do like being with people. I just like being with people. I enjoy being with people one-on-one. I'm not so much a person, who's going to, go into an event like the National Press Foundation Awards dinner a few weeks ago and work the room. That's not me. That doesn't give me energy. But meeting and talking to people one-on-one in that big room, yes, I love doing that. I enjoy having making those personal connections. So don't think because you might be an introvert that you don't you wouldn't be a good leader, because that's not the case. Introvert versus extrovert is really about how you get your energy and how you deplete your energy.
Now, I have to share that I actually met you at the NPF dinner, but I met you because one of our fellows, Mabenti Kwarshi, introduced you to me. And so clearly she's a leader. She's a people connector, but it was very serendipitous. So go ahead.
Absolutely. And Mabenti, so she is a connector. She's a bundle of energy in every way. I said a moment ago that you're always going to be the asshole in somebody's story. And so if you value being respected over being liked, you're a good candidate, and you want to be in a position to develop strong enough relationships with people, so that you can agree and disagree, and it's okay, and it's all about gaining that respect and valuing that respect. I also believe that in order to kind of get on the radar from a leadership perspective, you need to be good at something. Okay, you need to do something to make your mark in the organization, to be considered to be really good at something. When I contemplated making that first step up the leadership ladder, I discovered two things. I discovered I really enjoyed gaining knowledge personally and then sharing what I've learned with my colleagues. And so I started to study what is now called data journalism, but 30 years ago it was called computer assisted reporting. And I remember learning how to work with data, how to use database software, how to use spreadsheet software. And I started doing classes for my fellow reporters in how they could use those tools in their work. And that was one of the things that I think really put me on the radar of others in my newsroom to say, he might be a good candidate for advancement. But more importantly, you got to have a growth mindset. You have to believe in people. You have to believe that, even the most jacked up folks can learn how to get better. And they can, and with coaching, with training, with attention, that they can get better. At the very least, you need to be in a position to give people a chance to get better, before you basically make a decision to write that person off. I can't tell you how many times, I've encountered folks who are in positions of power who write folk off and believe that, no, this person is never going to be an investigative reporter. This person is never going to be X, Y, and Z. And that may be true, but you've not even tried to give that person the information to see if that perspective is really true. So I want to just briefly touch on some challenges of senior level roles and rewards. The number one challenge is people. Because everybody's got a different personality. You can't treat everybody the same. People come from, their own perspectives, and a big part of your role, from a leadership standpoint is, how do you focus the energy and the attention of these folks on the goals that your organization is trying to achieve, but also, creating a workplace climate that is respectful, that is trusting, that is open. And sometimes that requires confronting people with some of the crazy stuff that they do. And that's not fun. Also, big decisions and big consequences. I can't tell you, how many times over the years I've stood in front of rooms of people, delivered bad news, and it's a story in the paper, becomes a thing, and you have to make those decisions, and those decisions have consequences, and you have to be just very comfortable in the hot seat, and I've had to lay people off. I've had to close operations. But I've always been that person to stand in the front of the room and be in the meeting and have the conversation when I'm making that decision, and telling people what's happening. And I know I'm not going to be liked for that, but felt strongly that these were the right decisions that had to be made at the time that I made them. But you have to be comfortable with that. There is this concept called permanent whitewater. And if you've ever been rafting on a river, and there's a placid part of the river, and then you get to a section that with rocks and rushing water, and you have to kind of maneuver your raft through that whitewater safely to the other side. Media organizations are in permanent whitewater. It's an environment of constant change, and you've got to be comfortable with that. And finally, you have what I like to call walking the tightrope, and that tightrope exists on multiple levels. It's a tightrope as it relates to the degree to which you have to navigate both your personal life and your professional life. You have to navigate what you do and what you say, and behave in a way that is appropriate and that is reflective of what it means to be a senior leader. If you are again a person who's coming from an underrepresented background in newsrooms, you have to know when to speak up and when not to, and choose your battles. And it's a tightrope, and it can be very, very stressful. But even despite those challenges, there are rewards, and the rewards are, seeing people succeed. I couldn't tell you a few weeks ago at the Press Foundation dinner, Manny Garcia, the editor of the Austin American-Statesman, was named editor of the year, and he was like bound and determined that I be there. And so I flew to Washington, went to the dinner, had a great time, and he got up on that stage and he said, and Mizell has been instrumental. And I'm like, wow, you talk about just a proud moment, because I'm not on the stage. I've never been editor of the year. But the simple fact that I had the opportunity to be there, and to see him be so successful and be recognized for that success, was a moment that I will truly cherish. Same with the organization. You owe your best effort to the organization that is paying you, and you want your organization to be successful. And the beautiful part about senior level roles is that if the organization is successful, you will benefit from that success. You will benefit from that success reputationally. You will benefit from that success financially. And that goes to money. You make more money, and I'm not gonna lie. And so you have the ability, based on the success of your organization, to really set yourself and your family up for success in ways that you may have a few more challenges doing if you were at a lower level in the organization. And what all of that really adds up to, from my standpoint, is life enhancing experiences. I retired from Gannett and the USA Today Network back in October. And I had made a plan to transition to this next phase. And in making that plan, I booked a 21-day Mediterranean cruise, so that I wouldn't change my mind about retirement. And in 37 days, I leave on that cruise, and I could not be more excited about that. But just the opportunity to be able to do that is an extraordinary blessing. Have a couple of minutes, and so I want to make sure that we talk about planning. What does it mean to think about making this next step and working on how to get there? And so I want to talk a little bit about what it means to chart your course. And I recommend that you think about it in terms of your next job, your next goal. And there's a concept in goal setting that's called SMARTIE, SMARTIE. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? Is it time bound? Is it inclusive? And is it equitable? And inclusion and equity is very important to me personally. And in the personal context, I think about it in terms of my family. I think about it in terms of the causes and the people who are important to me. How does that goal that I have personally benefit other people around me? Also, what experiences will you need to obtain so that you can be best positioned for each step? What relationships do you need to cultivate to best position yourself for each step? But who knows you? And do you take advantage of opportunities such as this fellowship to gain additional visibility in the industry? So what knowledge gaps do you have and might you need to fill at every step? And how will you get them? Being focused on constant learning. And this is important, not developing on your company to do that for you, because at the end of the day, the company will cut you loose when they feel like it. You have to be the master of your own life and your own career. And so if your company is not providing you with support and training, you need to go get it yourself. Because at the end of the day, you are in charge. And finally, what risks are you willing to take in order to achieve your goal? And there are times when you will have to take a risk, maybe take a job or look at an opportunity that represents a risk, either a risk in terms of the role, the position, the organization, what it might mean to your family. And you've got to weigh that. You have to think bigger than just what's in front of you. And really the ones that I will call out on this list, communication, strategic thinking, and I call those out specifically because you all of those are connected in terms of thinking beyond just what is in front of you, and also being capable and able to respond when things come up that you don't expect. You have to be able to step up and lead when others are not doing so. And then finally, just a few closing thoughts in terms of what I've learned along the way. Top jobs have a very limited lifespan, and there is a trade-off for that increased compensation. That trade-off for that increased compensation is that job may change. The company may change. Mergers, acquisitions, reorganizations, all of those things have an effect on your longevity in that particular job. And so you have to be thoughtful about that. I referenced this a second ago, but sometimes you have to step down to step up. Sometimes moving to a lower role in a different organization or a lateral role in the same organization can set you up for advancement in ways that staying put may not. It is very critical that you manage the expectations of your family and that you manage your money well. I had the pleasure of celebrating 30 years with my wife. We'll have our 30th wedding anniversary next year. When we first met, we were both on the fast track, and so we really had to work as a team in order to navigate that. And one thing that we did that was, I thought, very smart at the time was we didn't necessarily increase our cost of living every time we got a new job. And that has allowed us to have a lot more financial flexibility than a lot of people. And then finally, you have to lead, you have to follow, or you have to lead. You're going to be involved in decisions that and make decisions that you would rather not have to make, and you have to carry out other decisions that you violently disagree with, and you have to decide: am I going to do this? Because if not, you got to go. And so managing your finances is critical so that you can have that level of freedom and flexibility to make moves when you get ready. And so with that, I'm going to stop. I apologize for the bandwidth challenges that we were having, but thank you all for having me today. And if we have time, I'm open to your questions.
I'm sure we're not going to mind cutting into our break time because we can't miss out on this opportunity to hear from Mizell. So are there any questions?
Hi, Mizell. My name is Torrance Latham. I'm an editor with the Miami Herald. I guess my question for you, I like that you mentioned sometimes you have to step down to step up. Can you give us an example in your career where you did take a step down and how that benefited you ultimately in your trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. I was back in, and I've got actually two examples of that. Back in 2016, I was managing editor of the Beacon Journal in Akron, Ohio, just about 20 miles away from where I live now. And we had gone through two changes of ownership in a very short period of time. And there was a new publisher who came in, a company had acquired the newspaper, and they overpaid for the paper. I mean, it was crazy the amount of money they paid. And they got in, they took one look at the books and they said, oh my God, we have a problem. And so they came to the editor and myself and said, you got to cut 25% of the newsroom. So we cut 25% of the newsroom. After that last set of goodbyes happened, they took one more look at what they were going to save with those cuts and came back and said, whoop, well, we didn't cut enough. And so they cut every senior manager. So the head of HR, the head of circulation, the editor-in-chief, just wiped that layer out. And then they came to me and said, well, Mizell, we watched you operate. When we ask you, to do stuff, you recognize what the issue is and, you do what needs to be done. We think you should be the next editor of the Akron Beacon Journal. To which I said, well, I want to think about that a little bit. Long story short, I went to work at the Courier and Press in Evansville, Indiana. I'd never been to Evansville, Indiana before. The Evansville newspaper was a third the size of the Akron Beacon Journal, but it was with a different company that was at a different stage. It was where I went. It was the Scripps Company. I was very successful in Evansville, small newspaper in Indiana, but 3 times in my 5 years there, we were either the winner or finalist for the best local news site in the state of Indiana, beating papers as large as the Indianapolis Star. And from that job, I was promoted to vice president of content for all of Scripps newspapers, supervising Evansville and 13 other sites.
Hi, Mizell. My name is Hiba. I'm a producer at NPR here in Washington, D.C. My question is that my executive producer, we have check-ins regularly, and she very kindly told me this past time around that, Hiba, I see you being somebody as a leader at this company within the NPR newsroom, which is a wonderful compliment. But one of the challenges that I see with that is that as great of a compliment as that is, I feel like I've gotten a lot of words of affirmation, but not a lot of action from my leaders. So I'm wondering, how do I leverage this moment, or any advice on how to kind of navigate this? Because words only go so far. They are important. Recognition of work is important, but how do I, or any of us who maybe are in this position, leverage that into real action, real opportunities?
Yeah. Well, this is a time when, in a moment where people are actively looking for journalists of color with leadership potential, and I'm just going to be that plain. In my formative years, that was still an issue, and I experienced exactly the same thing when I was a reporter. I had made it clear to my leadership that I wanted to have the opportunity to be promoted to management, and that I was doing everything that I could to prepare myself for that, and let them know that I was preparing myself for that. Doing a lot of reading. I mentioned teaching other journalists how to do computer assisted reporting, you name it. But at the end of the day, I had to go get another job off. Now, you can't play this card unless it's a job that you want, unless it's a job that you're willing to take, to take, and that you think you'll be successful at. But I was fortunate enough to be able to interview at another news organization to get an offer for exactly the job that I wanted. And I went back to my bosses and I said, well, we've had a conversation about this, blah, 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 blah. Haven't had a lot happening. I recognize that you've got some challenges, but here's the deal. I have an offer, and I'm inclined to take it, but I want to let you know, just in case there's an opportunity to stay, because my preference was to stay with that news organization. I knew the city. I knew the people. I had all the relationships. I felt like if I got promoted internally, it was going to be much better for my career than if I took this other job. So, the first response was, well. I said, okay, well, you'll have my letter of resignation tomorrow morning. And about 8:00 that night, I got the call to say, we'll promote you. And sometimes that's what it takes. But it's making it really clear that, if that's what you want, you make it very clear that that's what you want. But you also make sure that, you never quite stop networking. You never quite stop looking, in case another opportunity comes that helps you get that same result.
Mizell, I want to jump in really quickly and share with you one of the best pieces of advice I have ever received. And I want to hear your take on what it was. I was in my late 20s, early 30s. I was working at the Knight Ridder Washington Bureau, and I was pitching stories about social policy affecting children and families, and I was in the welfare reform hearings, and it was a really tense time. And I was sharing with a friend all of my neuroses and all of my concerns and all of my fears that I wasn't good enough and all of that. And he said to me, if you could close the gap between how the world sees you and how you see yourself, you could run the world. Tell me what you feel about how our self-vision, our insecurities, our fears can sort of block us from our power.
Well, I do a whole session on imposter syndrome. And I was with a group of Canadian journalists last week talking about that very topic. And one of the other presenters there had said something that was equally powerful, Rachel, to what you just mentioned. And it was, how is the world worse off? The world worse off if you don't show up as your best self. And the world will tell people in the world will tell you that somehow you're not worthy, and you will internalize that. All of us do, it is helpful to cultivate relationships with people around you who can snap you out of that feeling that you don't belong, who can snap you out of that feeling that you're not good enough. And one of the things I recommend, particularly, when we struggle with imposter syndrome, is keep a file of all of the attaboys and kudos you have ever received. And when you get in that moment where you're like, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, go back to that file and start paging through that file. I still have that file in one of the lateral file cabinets behind me. And I still stuff in it. I still put things in it because, after 35 years in this business, I still suffer from that. And so I have to take those moments to remind myself that I really do matter. I really do have value. And fortunately, I have people in my orbit who are able to reinforce for me that I do have the talent that I try to share with the world. Hey, Crystal.
I knew you'd hear me. I knew you'd recognize my voice. Hey, how you doing? How you
Good.
doing?
I remember
Casual, are we?
your lovely, luscious hair. That's right.
I knew you remember me. How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
I was gonna ask you, so like you're talking about leadership and whatnot. My thing about leadership and like being an editor and being the top one is that like, for me, the anxiety comes from me when like there's tough times in the company. I mean, we were in the same company, and like we know like what happens, and we know what happens with the journalism world, such as like layoffs happen, and then also like we're going through the issue of like trying to make news organizations come with like the big R reckoning. How do you get it, especially like when you're at the top of like a corporate media such as Gannett, where like there's multiple media sites? Like, how do you like make sure to ground yourself in that sort of leadership, and then to also like not internalize what you're doing as like, because like when layoffs happen, like you're seeing like your fellow friends, your journalists, and like people get hurt. Like, how do you not internalize that and not like bring it back home with you?
Well, I'm not gonna lie, you do internalize. You do internalize. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I've experienced over the years. There's a reason that my hair is white. I am not going to try to suggest to you that, what the industry has been dealing with for the last, 15 years, is not stressful. What I always have said, what I always told myself was just very simple. I always told myself, at the point that I didn't feel personally like I could be proud of what we do in my news organization, I couldn't put journalism out to the world that checked the boxes for me in terms of service to the community, in terms of, doing right by the people, in terms of, focusing on the things that matter. The moment that I didn't feel like I could do that, it would be time for me to step aside and let somebody else take over. You have to make that, you really have to make up your, now, what I'm here to tell you is that right now, there is a enormous change happening in local media. And my work now is focused on these brand new news organizations that are being founded and being developed in local communities around the country. What's interesting about those is that those are very small operations. I think we have a sense that, when our newsrooms were, dozens, we really had to have a lot of people. And if you pick your spots in terms of the journalism, and you're really focused on community, you don't necessarily need to have legions of people to have a really strong impact.
Hi, Mizell. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, it looks like you're unfrozen.
Yep.
My name's Amanda Goki. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe. I was just wondering, you mentioned that some of these top positions are pretty fleeting, like that the time length can be pretty short. Just as somebody who's a lowly reporter, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why that is. It's just like, it was surprising to me to hear that. I'm just curious about what are some of the dynamics at play that make it the case.
The reasons are varied. I think for the last, I do think for the last 10 years or so, we have been really focused on, industry consolidation. And so a lot of it is just dependent on the type of organization you're part of. Globe is a slightly different category. It is a nonprofit. It is, or not a nonprofit, but it's locally owned. The Henry families made a pretty significant investment. And so I would, so I would put the Globe in a different category. You have different, factors that sometimes will lead to, those changes. A new boss will come in with a new, vision. Some people like to bring in their own teams. My career has been marked by mergers and sales and acquisitions that have had an impact on my own career moves and the longevity in a particular role. I think news organizations, period, now. The pace of change is accelerating. What I like to say is that good people always land on their feet. And I've been just enormously fortunate. In 35 years, my wife and I joke about that. Never missed a paycheck, never missed a bill. I'm grateful.
What a note to end on. And from such an extraordinary leader, from a man who, as I say, I have heard of throughout my entire career. And I have to end by saying, Mizell, if I had met you 30 years ago, I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
It's not too late.
But thank you so much for joining these journalists. We will be reaching out to you not only through Widening the Pipeline, but through NPF, because we really need you on our side. So let's show Mizell our gratitude. And I will be sending them that handout that you sent to me. So they will receive that, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations to all of you on the end of the fellowship. And it's been a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Thanks for your patience with all the technology, and I wish you well.
Take care.